Story 1. For day to day, I have become very used to having an automatic in the last couple of years. It is much easier in heavy traffic. When driving for fun, I would prefer a lighter, smaller, and less comfortable car with a manual gearbox. I do not have room to park both on my driveway and not much time for fun driving, so I have an automatic. Story 2. Manual. For me, it feels like I'm way more connected to my vehicle compared to driving an automatic where the only thing I do is press the gas or brake pedal. I also feel like manual vehicles are less likely to be stolen. Story 3. I prefer automatic because it's just easier, especially in traffic. I don't want to stress over shifting gears when I'm already stressed about making it on time. Story 4. It's easier to learn to drive a manual when you're young. It might get harder as you get older. If you can drive a manual, you can easily switch to driving an automatic. But it doesn't work the other way around. Since you are young and can't decide, I would suggest you start out with a manual because it will be very easy to switch later if you change your mind. I'm an old guy who prefers manuals. Story 5. Automatic driving is a necessary evil, not any kind of mystical experience. I want to go from A to B in the easiest, smoothest way possible. Anything that can make the experience less intense, no matter how minor the improvement, is welcome. Story 6. I prefer a manual. Part of it is that it is what I grew up driving. Part of it is just more fun, and I feel more like I'm driving. But they are getting very hard to find in the United States, and it's only going to get worse, so my next car might have to be an automatic. Story 7. I drive all electric, so it's a no-brainer. There are no gears. That being said, when I drive performance cars or race, it's all manual. I have never perfected the art of the paddle shifter. It lets me slow down more than I anticipate, or I forget to click it when accelerating. Story 8. Learned in manual and always preferred it over automatic, but I fell off some steps and injured my left ankle, which makes driving a manual quite painful. Automatic all the way now. The car also has adaptive cruise control, which makes long drives much easier. Story 9. I normally drive manual, but I have to say automatic was a blessing in mountain terrain with a million U-turns. Just being able to press the pedal and have the thing shift itself was wonderful. Story 10. Automatic is nice for being stuck in traffic. It's a bit of a pain feathering the clutch for an hour, but for anything else, manual. I feel more connected to the car. I feel like I can utilize the gears better and how I want to, and it's just more fun and engaging. I also believe that people who can manage a manual transmission well are better drivers since they understand their car better. Story 11. Automatic. I just want to get from A to B, and I'm not a car enthusiast who enjoys joy rides. In most countries, manual is dying out, not to mention so many cars going electric. Story 12. I prefer the memory of driving stick when I lived in a rural area, but I don't think I'd say that after an hour in traffic where I live now. And I'm talking true manual with a foot-operated clutch and a shifting knob. Paddle shifters do not count. Story 13. Manual. After getting used to it, you don't even have to think. Just react, and it's like an extension of your body. With a manual, I find I can make it do exactly what I need when I need it. From downshifting ahead of time so I can have the torque I need to accelerate how I want at the moment I want, to going into a lower gear so I can slow down through a roundabout and go through without ever taking my foot off the gas to brake. Story 14. Keeps me engaged with the car. Also, I can drive efficiently with a manual transmission. Being in control of your idle speed when stuck in traffic is nice too. I rarely hit my brakes in stop-and-go congestion. It's getting harder to find them, though, at least in the United States. I might switch to an electric for my next car. If I can't have a manual transmission, I don't want a transmission at all. Story 15. Manual all day, but I've been around cars all my life, and it's how I connect. Driving is a passion for me, and I don't care if I'm in traffic. It's just fun for me. Story 16. I prefer manual, but I'm not very good at it. I only recently learned to drive stick. But it's fun for me. I love driving in general, but automatic is just boring. Story 17. Well, I much prefer automatic over manual. I personally don't understand for 1 second what people mean when they say they can feel their car more when they drive manual. To me, it's just an annoyance to have to do anything other than pressing the gas pedal. Story 18. I drive a manual stick-shift sports car, and I love it. I have had manual cars since I started driving 40 years ago. I feel much more engaged and in control. I like how I can slow down by downshifting. However, I do live in a very hilly city. Starting from a dead stop on a hill with cars behind me still gives me anxiety, even after driving for 40 years. And yes, start and stop rush hour traffic is challenging. But I've arranged my life to minimize all of that. I was thinking of getting a new car, but found it very hard to find one that I liked with a manual transmission. It is hard to believe that my 11-year-old car is now considered a classic. Story 19. It completely depends. If I am on a long trip on motorways, I prefer an automatic. If I am driving short distances on country roads, I kind of prefer a manual. It is the same with track driving. Story 20. I'm driving about 25 kilometers to college, so I will be preferring automatic. I have recently turned 18, so I'll be getting fully accustomed to manual and then I'll be moving to automatic. P.S. Where I live, you can't drive before 18. Story 21. I've had a lot of different cars in my life. Manuals when I was younger, automatics later. My last manual was a convertible Saab 93. I just don't enjoy clutch driving in city traffic. On uncrowded highways, it's great, but otherwise it's shift up, shift down, up, down, up, down. I prefer to drive automatics from now on. Story 22. Automatic. I already have a lot of things going on in my mind, and I don't want to stress about changing gears or driving a manual anymore. One less thing to worry about. Story 23. Automatic. It is inconvenient to drive a manual transmission when stuck in traffic or in the city, especially if you want to have a snack or coffee while driving. I do not mind manual in general and would even buy one if it were cheaper, but automatic does provide more comfort. Story 24. When I started driving more long distances, I prefer automatic. It's just convenient. However, manual can be fun for shorter distances if you have the right car for it. Story 25. Depends on what it is and the conditions. My truck, I like the 10-speed automatic because it's easy. My Corvette, I prefer the 6-speed manual for the extra control. I started driving in the early 1980s when a manual was necessary to have any sort of performance at all. My truck now is faster than anything I drove back then. Story 26. I will say most manual drivers are pretty defensive drivers. They cruise and leave huge gaps as it's difficult to go from speed to zero. But I notice when they leave the large gaps, everyone just cuts in front of them. It must be frustrating. Story 27. I preferred manual overall because it was more control, but I went back to automatic when I had kids because I wanted to simplify as much as possible. Plus, traffic is gross where I live, and the manual got annoying in stop and go. Story 28. The only time I ever hate driving stick is in heavy traffic. Stop and go really sucks in a manual car. Otherwise, I will always prefer manual and really miss driving one. Plus, having a manual car is basically like having a security system installed because there's a pretty low percentage of people who can drive a manual car, especially young people. Story 29. When I was younger, I would swear by the stick shift. Now I am older and praise the automatic. Although I do enjoy driving my wife's sister's car when she comes to visit, stick shift. I hope this didn't come out wrong. Story 30. Stick always. I drove automatic for a while, and so many times I felt the need to downshift for increased speed. You could sort of do it with the paddle shifter things, but it wasn't as reactive. It just doesn't feel the same. Story 31. Manual. I like feeling like a race car driver, even if I'm just going to the grocery store. Plus, it keeps my other hand from getting too comfortable with snacks. Story 32. I love a manual, but they are becoming increasingly hard to find in the United States. My current vehicle is an automatic, and I fear I may be losing my manual skills. Story 33. Manual for me always. I have only ever owned one automatic, and it was not even mine. It was loaned to me while I was doing an engine swap and fabrication work on my manual truck. Story 34. I have only owned manual cars, and I am on my third. I just prefer it. I do a lot of coasting and engine braking to improve my gas mileage. It provides better control on steep hills or in bad weather and makes it harder for me to zone out when driving because I have to pay attention to my revolutions per minute. I don't like when people act like driving a manual makes you special. It doesn't. I just happened to have a dad with a manual car who taught me when I was 15, and then I got that car when I was 18. I am 30 now. Story 35. Manual. I have better control of the car in slowing down, speeding, and turning corners. The only time I don't like manual is when I'm in rush hour traffic. That's murder, especially on the knees. But other than that, give me a stick. Story 36. Manual for a number of reasons. 1. I have attention deficit/hyperactivity disorder and I constantly need to be moving, especially my hands, or else I start to feel weird. It also causes my brain to consistently recognize that I need to pay attention to driving and not get distracted. I like to pretend my Honda Civic Sport Injected is a race car. Story 37. I used to drive only manuals until 2015 when I traded my Civic C for my wife's CR-V. I ended up driving our old Corolla and later my mother-in-law's old Prius that she gifted me. I just never really yearned to go back to a manual after driving an automatic. It was easier in traffic, and my wife could also drive my car when needed. It just made everything easier in the long run. I will probably buy an older performance car at some point and get another manual. Someday, but definitely not today. Story 38. I drive a manual now and have been for a few years, but I am looking to switch to an automatic because my city has so much traffic post-COVID that I find no joy in driving a manual anymore. Story 39. I don't live anywhere that gets traffic jams, so no downside there. Manual is also slightly more interesting to drive, but as others have said, once you have mastered it, it doesn't take any sort of active thought. It's more that there are times when you can make it more interesting if you want to. I also drive a lot on icy mountain roads, and I like to be able to choose when I change gears, as well as how long I want the gear change to take and what level of engine braking I want to allow. I know you can select lower gears in automatic cars, but I don't like not being able to control the clutch. Story 40. It depends. For older, performance-oriented cars, I would prefer manual for the engagement and experience. Rev match downshifting can be an incredible experience. However, for newer cars with advanced technology and automatic transmissions, such as dual-clutch transmissions, I would rather go with automatic featuring paddle shifters and drive modes. If you are in stop-and-go traffic all the time, definitely choose automatic. Manual is harder to get right, but extremely rewarding when you do. Story 41. The future is automatic. When artificial intelligence will get better than humans, it will read and act on situations and intentions better. For example, collecting driver behavior data and acting in certain ways in a trillion different cases. All manual fanboys I knew eventually switched to automatic unless you want to feel car performance or are a racing lover. Story 42. I did have a souped-up 2.8 Sierra Turbo that was automatic. Man, it pulled. But not as much as a manual. My neighbor has a 1970 Dodge Charger with a supercharger. Man, it's a nuclear weapon and manual. How I'd love to crash those gears. He's got a Mustang too. Problem is they are left-hand drives. Oops. Too much for me to handle. Just checked the Dodge online, and it does 0 to 60 in less than 5 seconds. Story 43. I've only owned manual transmission cars, so driving with a stick is second nature. Manual cars used to be cheaper. If I ever buy another car, I guess it will have to be an automatic. Story 44. Manual transmission keeps me connected to the driving task, whereas automatics let people's attention wander more. Keeps me in tune with the vehicle as I'm driving. It allows me to use the power band and engine revolutions per minute more precisely, especially during acceleration and maneuvering. Lastly, it's just more fun. Story 45. Manual helps me stay more focused on driving. From my motorcycles to my cars, I feel like as a defensive driver, I really see things I don't normally see when driving my automatic trucks. Story 46. It depends. When I was young and drove a Porsche, I preferred the control of the manual. Now that I am old and drive a Lexus, I like the ease and comfort of an automatic. Plus, I am not trying to toss the Lexus around corners. It is not that type of car. Story 47. It's more practical regarding attention and wheel control. I never wanted to learn because my family's lifestyle associated it with high-octane, gas-guzzling, fuel-consuming racers in sports or classic cars, when I'd rather drive a Prius. Although my therapist apparently drove a manual Leaf or minicar, which dissuaded theft, it offered mild practicality. I still prefer the reliability and fuel efficiency of an automatic. Story 48. The only time I do not like having a manual is when I hit truly bad traffic, which does not happen all that often. I got caught up in Indianapolis a few weeks ago when there were over 130 wrecks, and that is the first time in about 5 years where I actually caught myself thinking, I would rather be in an automatic right now. Story 49. For fun, manual. As a tool, automatic. Being stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic in a manual is straining on the legs and not enjoyable at all. Manual might save you some gas if you're skilled, might discourage a theft. But other than that, it doesn't really have any benefits over automatic for use as a tool. Story 50. I drove exclusively manual transmissions from 1994 when I got my license up until 2021 when I bought my Ram truck. I drive from the Bay Area to Tahoe regularly in the winter. Driving in snow is unmatched with all-wheel drive and a stick shift. I miss my manuals, but I need a truck for my dog adventure business. Story 51. I really prefer manual. Grew up driving only manual. Now I have 4 automatic cars and 4 manual cars. Whenever I'm in my automatics, my internal voice is constantly screaming, "Shift, you piece of junk," or "Why the hell did you shift already, you piece of junk?"